You're excited about our guest today.
I'm doing great. Thank you, Neil. And yes, I am very excited. Lorna Graham. She is the author of The Ghost of Greenwich Village and Where You Once Belonged. And she's a writer. Her day job is Dateline NBC, which I was telling her I happen to be a big fan of. So, she has also written numerous PSAs and speeches and films, as she's written speeches for the presidents Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, Tom Hanks, Harrison Ford, Morgan Freeman.
Wow.
And anyway, so welcome, Lorna. Good to have you.
Thank you, Neil and Sherry. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So we'll go ahead, share with your first question for Lorna.
Well, your book that's coming out now, Where You Once Belonged. So, why did you write that book and what's it about?
Okay, well, the book is about a 40-something executive producer of a primetime news magazine show. Her name is Everly Page, and I know a little bit about the inner workings of primetime news magazine shows. So I thought, what a great setting, that I have all around me every day because you have all this fodder for stakes and drama. You have all of these really smart, competitive people under one roof. You have stories that could save lives if they can air them. So I thought this is a great setting. And my character, Everly, is very much at this point in her 40s a cynic. She believes, generally speaking, that people are not to be trusted, that they are unreliable, and so she really thinks that also is helpful for her as a journalist, right? Always better to be skeptical of the world around you. Unfortunately, it sort of bled over into her personal life. And it makes life difficult with a wonderful boyfriend that she has, but he has a big, loving kind of family that's kind of in his business all the time. And she's like, I'm a loner. Everly lost her mother when she was just a child, and her father moved to Europe right when she went to college, and he started another family there. So she's used to being alone. But in college, she falls in with this really wonderful group of girls at this off-campus feminist house that's full of history of the women's suffragist movement, which is near, it took place in Seneca Falls, New York, which is near the fictional town that I've created in the book. And those women were in turn inspired by Native American women who had a much more advanced society than the white women did. So we go back and forth in time with her. We're with Everly when she's in her 40s and cynical. And then every other chapter, we're back with her in college when she was idealistic and really, was a burgeoning young journalist at the school paper. And she had these wonderful friends. And part of the tension of the book is how did this young idealistic girl become this embittered woman? And you're wondering as you go back and forth. And then, without giving too much away, I will say that the two storylines quite literally cross. And in terms of my inspiration, which is a great question, there was a movie in the 90s called Living Out Loud, and it stars Holly Hunter, Danny DeVito, and Queen Latifah, if you can imagine that. And Holly Hunter plays this Upper East Side of Manhattan doctor's wife. He dumps her for a younger model. She feels very unsexy, not good about herself, useless. She doesn't really have a career. And Queen Latifah takes her to this underground club one night and gives her a hit of, some little white pill. Maybe it's ecstasy. We don't know. And Holly Hunter's character starts dancing on the dance floor, and maybe that pill kicks in. And she suddenly feels like all the women around her falling into formation and they're dancing sort of like chorus line. And she's starting to feel herself again. And then she feels a tap on her shoulder. She turns around, and it's her teenage self. And the two women look kind of across the decades at one another. And then they embrace and they start slow dancing together, and the camera pulls back. And these two, younger and older versions of this woman, disappear into the crowd. The next day, the Holly Hunter character starts taking her life back again. And I thought, what a cool idea, because I think a lot of us, if we've played that kind of thought exercise where you meet your younger self, Usually it's like you want to hug them and tell them everything's going to be okay. And what I loved about this movie scene is it turned that on its ear. It said, what if you met your younger self and they inspired you? What if they made you go, oh my God, I've made some mistakes. I need to go back to try to get back to that person I was when I was, idealistic and I was coming into my own. So that's sort of a bit about the book and the character and where it all came from.
See, I love that explanation. How much is the character like you? You were saying a bit. Now, what do you look at and specifically in your career and how the challenge is to kind of not be jaded in your
Well,
career?
I am a writer. I've always been a TV news writer in local news, then at Good Morning America, and now at Dateline. And I've done a lot of freelance work. I've worked a few times with Steven Spielberg and had excellent experiences. I have never myself wanted to climb up the ladder and become a producer or go into management because I love the writing. So I want to kind of stay where I am, but broaden out the kind of writing I do as opposed to go up the ladder. In terms of Everly and I also lost my mother as a child, and my father lived in Norway with his other family. And I wanted to write a character that sort of had my same building blocks because I was like, then I'll understand her from the inside out. Okay. But then I thought, I was lucky enough, even though I had these sad things happen to me as a kid, that my natural instinct was to always look for the allies. My teachers would become my allies. My friends' mothers, I would actually say to my friends after school, hey, can we go to your house and hang out with your mom? And they'd be like, no, that's not fun. But to me, finding those adults in the world and friends who could be my allies were how I got through my tough times. My character, Everly, takes a completely different lesson, as I mentioned before. She believes the world is fundamentally untrustworthy, that your friends will let you down. And she sort of holds on to this skepticism, almost fetishizing it. It's so central to her. She thinks she's got the world beat. She'll never be hurt again. And as we all know, that's not really how it works. So that was my thinking in terms of how we're alike and how we're very different.
Interesting. Sherry, what question do you have for Lorna?
Being a author of multiple books, it's interesting how your writing approach had evolved. How did it evolve between the two books in your words and your perspective?
Mm. Well, there's certain things both books have in common. Both of them have a woman in the news business. The Ghost of Greenwich Village is about a young woman who moves to New York and gets a job at a show very much like Good Morning America. And in her apartment, there is a ghost of a Beat Generation writer. Think like a Jack Kerouac kind of writer. And that was inspired by the apartment that you're looking at right now behind me. um, there was a writer who lived in this apartment named Donald Barthelme, he wrote avant-garde short stories and was very, very highly acclaimed. So I sort of thought the TV news business is very much of this world. And then my character has this ghost at home. She's pulled between past and present and realism and, the ghost world. And that book, I'm happy to say, has been optioned to go hopefully to the screen by Stevie Van Zandt, who people may know from The Sopranos, and of course Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. So we'll see if something comes of that, which would be super exciting. But in terms of how my writing changed, I think I was inspired by my main characters. In The Ghost of Greenwich Village, Eve is the name of the character. She's young and naive and kind of poetic, and she's, in love with the romance of New York City. Everly is a very different kind of character. She romance of New York City, not really. She's in her apartment so she can, feed herself and take a shower, and then she wants to get right back to work. She's all about the job. So I think my writing in the second book is a little more like commercial. In the first book, it's a little more lyrical, a little more in her head and poetic and romantic. And in this book, she's very much a hard-nosed producer who really is always trying to like get ahead and go forward. That's not really me. I didn't want to be a manager, but I felt my writing change as I got into her mental space.
Okay. And you're a writer in your day job. It's not producer, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So
Correct.
you probably looked at other producers you worked for and said, how can I create that exactly character I want? Right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I I work in such a lovely place with such an incredible group of people. I don't know if there's anyone quite as ruthless as Everly. I mean, there's certainly talented, ambitious people, but Everly is willing to do things for her career that I think most of us would agree are not great. So
Right.
she wants to become president of the news division. And to do that, she feels as a woman, rightly or wrongly, but this is what she believes, she has to do whatever her boss says. She can't afford the luxury of pushback like some of her male peers at the other shows at this network. So when he tells her, for instance, I need you to kill this big investigative story that could save lives because, oh, an advertiser might not like it. She's really in a tough space. She cares about journalism very much and she wants to air the story. She's very proud of it. But what does this mean? She gets fired and then can't practice journalism anymore. Her boss also wants her to fire some staffers. And this is all because their network is owned by a multinational parent company, as so many of today's media are, as we know. And in that kind of situation, it's very tricky. For instance, China at one point in the book devalues its currency. That spirals all the way down through the network to her, to Everly, and now she has to lay off 5% of her staff
Right.
because the
Yeah.
multinational corporation is now suffering because of
Or-
the Chinese decision. So I can't say there's anyone I work with directly who is in the kind of positions she is in, but just everything I've learned from Dateline and from all the producers I work with all kind of fed into it, and I hope made it feel like a very believable
Mhm.
workplace and newsroom.
How much is it like I don't know if you're a fan of morning show on Apple TV.
Yes. Oh, for sure.
How much is it like that? What your daily work is like
Well,
working for these shows?
yeah, I mean, the characters get pulled in different directions. The morning show spends a lot of time with the people on air, whereas my book is more about the people that you don't see off screen, not really so much about the on camera people. But I will say that working at Dateline is a masterclass in storytelling. Sherry, you said you were a fan. I mean, there's a lot of true crime out there, but I think there's one reason Dateline is called the true crime original. It's the storytelling. And we used to have a saying around the office, which was, it's not about the murder, it's about the marriage. It's not so much this killing and how it happened. It's, well, who were the people in this marriage? Who were these siblings that had a falling out? What was this family business that went under? And we learn a lot about by being kind of marinating all the time in these true life human stories. We learn a bit about human nature and about relationships. So that all went into my book. Commercial breaks are kind of like chapter endings where you want to leave them
Right.
with a bit of a cliffhanger,
Exactly.
So there are a lot of things I picked up about structure. And then one last thing I'll say about it is we have these screenings at Dateline before the show airs. We look at an early cut of the show and we just talk about how to tell that story in the best way
Um,
possible. And we always have someone there from the legal department and from standards and practices. And their job is to keep us honest and keep us fair, even to the murderer in the story. And what I learned about this for fiction is that it's just important to be fair to your fictional characters as real life characters. Because if I just write a pure villain who has no backstory and no rationale for what they're doing, first of all, that doesn't feel very true to life, and it's just not very interesting. But at Dateline, we try to pull out all the parts of this person who eventually became a killer. Why are they like that? And I try to do that in fiction too. I have some antagonists in my story, but I try to make them feel like 3D human beings so that they're believable and more fun to read about.
okay. All right. So Sherry, final question before we have to let her go.
Well, can they get a hold of you, Lorna? If
Oh,
someone reach
yes.
out?
I mean, I'm not a huge social media person, which is my bad, but my website is www.lornagraham.com, lornagraham.com, and you can find out more about me, my books, how to order my books from all kinds of places. If people watch the Today Show and know Jenna Bush Hager's Read with Jenna book club, She did a post about my book, so you can, find out about that on her website. People can find me. I'm on Twitter as a very village gal, but I'm not on Instagram, and you guys probably are, and I know I should be. And one day I'll get
I
it
am. I
together.
never spend any time on Instagram. I'm a big LinkedIn guy, but I
Oh
don't
yeah,
spend
me
a lot of
too.
time. So I own an agency and I'm like, I don't spend tons in social media. I
Yeah,
just do so many podcasts. I'm out there streaming all the time. I
exactly.
would put that point, but you have to put so much time into it. And that's why you have to have a team,
Yeah,
because that team, you're not going to get anything done.
yeah.
But we appreciate it so much, Lorna. Thanks again. And
Thank
go to
you.
storehousemediagroup.com to find information on Sherry. Thanks again, Lorna.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Sharon.